Welcome back to my game dev series. So in this video I wanted to keep fleshing out the battle screens, and to do that the first thing that we need is to implement key down functionality or key event functionality in the battle module. So in my engine here, if I go up to the handle key events function, you'll notice within the key down event, it's basically delegating to various submodules based on their individual state. So if the title screen is showing, we just want that submodule to handle its own key events. Likewise for message box and the debug console. So what I really need to do here is add one more layer of else if on here. And that is going to be if state in battle is true, then we need battle to handle key down. And we just pass the SDL key event into that. Then we'll just have to build out this function. So what I'm going to do right here by default is kind of copy this one right from the engine, and then we'll modify this and chop some stuff down as we go. So here back in my battle module, and yeah, I'm calling it a module. It's basically kind of like a subsystem. I know that's a little bit of a vague term, but it's not a class, it's a namespace, but a namespace isn't really a module. I don't know. I'm calling it a module or a subsystem, so just deal with it. So I'm going to paste this in here. And then we'll also add this function declaration to the header. Alright. So we will want up, down, left, right keys and space. We don't need F. We don't need C. Now, for the main gameplay, I'm tracking key down and key up states, but for the battle module here, I don't think I really need to care so much about key up, since I'm not moving the player around the map and I'm not focused so much on making it so you can't mash the same key a billion times, or making sure that something else needs to complete before you kind of manage a key press again. I don't really need to save a key down and a key up state, so I'm just going to delete those lines for right now. And I'm just going to log the output to make sure that this is getting delegated properly to this function. I have very little doubt that it's getting called correctly, but we'll see. space, left, right. Okay. Now, one thing that I noticed was in battle, let's see, go down to my update function. State in battle is true. Okay, so no, that's fine. Never mind. I was noticing that milliseconds to battle is counting down, and then it had a lot of down key output. But that was, I was still holding that button down when it was jumping down into this segment. So it was doing the screen wipe, and then it was going down to the intro and all that kind of stuff. So we should be good with that. Ultimately, what I need to do is manage the state in some form or another, because we're popping into a battle, and so we show some intro text, which is, where does that happen? Right here, showing intro. So we're just arbitrarily coding that into the render, so that's going to need to change. And then we need to be able to press the space bar to pop out of the intro, which is basically telling us that the enemy appears. And then after we hit spacebar, we need to go into the actual battle itself. So that'll show you your attacks, and you can select one of those, and then that'll just go through a loop of doing attacks, so doing damage, taking damage, checking if the player or the enemy is dead, and then taking action accordingly. So the question becomes, how do we set certain Boolean values, or how is this loop going to go? Because obviously we have certain things that need to happen, showing intro being the first. So why don't we go up to our key down, and here in the space we'll do if showing intro and we'll just invert that. And then showing intro is true by default. All right, so if I go up here, it's true. And now, theoretically, on the space key press, it should turn that to false, and then we can go into the battle loop. So let me keep this here for right now. And I'll do an else. I think we might want to do more or less like a write text function in here, or else I'm going to end up duplicating this code a lot, I think. So let's just do that. We'll call it that. I'll pass in the text that we want to write. I need that line. Well, essentially I'll always put it in the same place. So right now it's just going to be centered. So here we can do render text that. Down here, if we're not showing the intro, we can just do render text, select attack. I don't necessarily know that this logic should be in the render versus the update. It should probably be in the update because that's really just where all the state logic is happening in here. Like, you really shouldn't have logic in a render function aside from just displaying certain things in certain positions. That's just my opinion, though. That being said, I am just calling a render function. So I don't know. We'll we'll play with that and see what makes the most sense as we go. And hopefully it doesn't become too spaghetti-ish. Okay, so if I press spacebar, it goes to the select attack, which is good. Now we basically just need to do a loop of selecting an attack versus the enemy doing his attack. So what we need to do first, I would think, is the player needs to have some type of list of attacks that they can do. So let's see. Move my files around a little bit. What I think the player needs is I guess we'll just make it a vector because that's gonna save state. Well, it has to be a 1 second here. Is that what I'm looking for? Contiguous storage, which makes sense. And I mean, you do in place into a vector, correct? I know I use vectors somewhere else. I wish it would search only my code, but wow, that was a mistake. All right. So in state, we have vectors. And now we'll need unordered map if I'm going to have a string key, which is fine. So standard unordered map, standard string, which is the key, and then we'll do float. We'll call that damage. Well, you don't name it right now. Attacks. Okay. And then the enemy, which they're in types. They already have that because I put that in before. You know, I shouldn't put this in player H. I should put that in the type. Like that. Okay. So both those structs have attacks now. So for my player, I need to initialize those. So here's my stats. This is my attacks. So let's see. I want to do punch. I want to briefly check to see how I'm doing that in my simulation. We'll pull up our JavaScript here. Player, punch is 10. Stick was 15. Axe was 20. So that's good. And then for the enemy, who's just getting hard-coded in our battle code right now, we should do enemy attacks equals, can you do that? Maybe that'll work, I don't know. So for enemy we had jab and club. So 5 and 9. Club 9. We'll see if that syntax actually works. No, it doesn't. Player 34 cannot convert from initializer list to standard. Oh god. Yeah, of course he can't. To unordered multi-map. I don't know if that matters, but trailing commas, no, it doesn't. I didn't think it did. Why you got beef, bro? What's your problem? Attacks, attacks. So items, let's see, stats, items, attacks. No, because we're not, yeah. That needs to be above items. We're not initializing any items. I mean, I suppose we could, but I don't know if that's necessary or if you can even do that. I mean, let's try. No. So I'm gonna not do the items there. And it still has a problem. It seems to not like my key value pairing here. So I guess I should look up how to actually do this. Okay? It's more or less what I'm doing, I thought. Something of that nature, anyway. So what's its problem? Conversion from standard iOS base IO state to float. Possible loss of data. Oops. I can type. Conversion from double to float. Yeah. What, do you just want an F on that? Is that how you do it? It's been a while since it's yelled at me about that kind of thing. I guess that's not a thing. Oops. So we'll ignore the fact that it's even yelling about that. Just figure out why it's... Do I just need to in place? Because I mean, I can do that, but... Player T... Sprite would score stats. It doesn't like those for some reason. So I'm initializing a struct that has another struct, and that works. Random integer values, that works. Score. Let's see, stats is a struct, but this is an unordered map. It doesn't seem to like that. I mean, I could always pull this out. And then I could do in place, you know. I'll just keep them capitalized. And yeah, I can do it this way. I was trying to avoid that, but that's fine. You okay with that? Of course, I need to do the same thing here. Really? Now that's just not being nice. What gives, dude? It's like it's not even. Obviously, I know it's with the code that I just wrote. That being said, it's not like giving me an actual line number that I can look at to know how stupid I'm being. Undermap, string, float. This is probably stupid to even try, but sometimes you just gotta try stupid things. Are you kidding me? Because it's an int and not a float. I mean, alright, that's just... So for the sake of argument here, if I put these back like this, is it going to take that? You're kidding me, right? Apparently not. I have no great love for C++. Probably a lot of people here don't. I mean, that's really just absurd. I don't know why the error message couldn't have been a little bit more clear about, oh, you're trying to use a float like a dumbass. Even though I don't really necessarily understand why you can't do it that way. I mean, am I just... Do I need to go back to the basics here? I don't see why I couldn't infer that on its own. really absurd. Okay, well anyway, now we can start displaying our attacks. So what I want to do there is, let me close some of this crap first. So we have render attacks. Let's do render text. Let's do render attacks. I guess the question is, do we want to make this more generic in that we pass in an unordered array of attacks and then use those, or do we want to just automatically go right to the player and grab from there? I think for right now, because I in this game anyway, I don't intend on ever having anybody besides the player that you can actually play as. So I think we can go directly into that object and then get the attacks directly from it instead of having to pass something into this function. And of course, if we ever decided to change that in the future for whatever reason, I mean, that would be massive scope creep, but I can always come back and readdress this. So let's see. And I never want to have more than 4 attacks anyway. How do you get the number of items in an unordered map? Is that just a count function? Might be, I'm not sure. Count. Function does not take 0 arguments. Size, I think, is what I'm looking for. I really need to look at my compile times again. Like, this should be done in seconds, like 2 seconds, not 8. It helps if I actually call that function. So let's do that here. Okay, so we can get the count, and so I guess we could essentially put those in a table of sorts on the screen. So I guess you could have more than 3 attacks, or more than 4 even, but for right now, just to keep it simple, we'll go with that. Can you get elements from an unordered map sequentially? I guess that's the question. That I don't know. Yeah, I suppose you can. That should do it. Oh, that does it at a key. You just do an iterator, I suppose. So, okay, let's... Frankly, doing iterators in C++ is such a pain in the ass, too. Here. Sorry, I know I'm jumping around here. I'm just finding my stupid iterator syntax because I really haven't done this in a while. I don't even need the size, I guess, since I'm just looping over every single element in my attacks. So I also need STL rect position. So let's do position dot width. I don't really care what the width is. So position dot x equals some amount from the side of the screen, right? So we want to have one attack here, one here, one here. Or do we just want to put them in a line going down? That might be easiest for right now. Let's just put them in one column. So from the left of the screen, or do we just want to center them maybe? At which point we could leverage our render text function. And the thing about that is I need to be able to pass in the cursor position to some extent, right? But that's also using Unispace, so which we would continue using that font, yes. That's I was putting it in the same location for height, and then it's centering it. So we can come back and maybe leverage that later, but for right now, since I'm also going to want to put in icons next to them so you can see which one is selected. we'll need to save that state. So the selected attack. X we're going to put at tile size times 3. So that'll just be closer to the left side of the screen, but it's not going to be flush against it. Position Y is going to be somewhere below that intro text type of stuff. So instead of 5, we'll do 4. So that should be 4 blocks up from the bottom, whereas the intro text is 5 blocks up from the bottom. And then in our iterator loop, we essentially just want to do this junk. This doesn't need to be an STL-rect. I don't know why I did that. It could just be a point float. Or even a point int position. So we'll do that, and then this will be position.y. This will be position.x. That'll be 0. Right. Text. And to get the text, we need to get the, let's see, value from the iterator. Is that how you do that? I don't know. We'll try that. Something else we need to do is increment the y position within this. So position.y plus equals, I don't know if I can get the line height of the font easily. So we'll just do 20 for now arbitrarily. Okay. Okay, just do that. I can't even write my own code anymore. I don't know why I try sometimes. $179 text. Text is not player attacks. That's why you just shouldn't copy and paste, because you do stupid shit. Yeah, state player. Cannot convert argument. Well, yeah, we don't really want the second, do we? We want to see the attack name. So is that going to give us just the string? I don't know. Apparently not. Do I have to do first? I probably do. mean, the thing is, I don't use C++ often enough that I retain all this very well. Because the last time that I actually wrote an iterator for just a standard type was, and it had to have been over 6 months ago, to be honest. So there was some time over the summer when I wasn't really working on this because I had other stuff to do. So okay, that's good. We see that our attacks are getting rendered. Maybe we can push that more into the center. I still want them left aligned-ish, kind of. Maybe. I don't know. So position Y, position 3. Let's just bump that up, double. Sorry, let me cancel that. And we'll do a little bit more spacing between the attacks as well. Okay, that moved him down quite a bit to begin with, though. So, right. So for the first iteration, we don't want to have that addition of 30 pixels at the top. So we'll do it after it prints the text. That looks better, kind of. For render text function, I think I do want to pass in a position, because I would like it so that my attacks and my label above them to select an attack show up more or less in the same place. Or same left alignment, I should say. Well, that is centered, so that makes it slightly problematic. I'm just going to be verbose about this. Position Y equals that. Position X equals this. So we'll add position into here. Oh, well, kind of the problem doing that, though, is we haven't really told the text writer what font we're using yet. Well, this is slightly nightmarish code at this point. You know, let's just undo all that. That's not a good course to be taking right now. Or 7, maybe. And I'm assuming that in the future I'm just going to redo a bunch of this UI, but for right now I need something functional so I can kind of test my battle loop. Okay, we'll go with that, and then you'll have a little pointer icon next to it. So I think that'll do for right now. I'll put a colon on the end of that. So we do have an arrow icon which I use in the message box for the yes/no dialogue. Let me position that somehow. No, let's see, that's the container for it. That's the actual text. And then here's the icon. So I'm going to copy this, and then we will adapt that for our own uses. So we'll put that here. If selected attack equals iter first, we'll dump our little icon in. That's direct tile, so that's good. Position, we want to do position.x minus tile size, maybe. That's probably going to put it a little bit too far over to the side, but we'll see how that goes. Let's do position y. I need to call that something else. Or, no, let's do that. Change that to icon position just so I don't get confused. Yes, no, select. That's not a thing here. Okay. Position. Right, you can't change that one. Container. What did that used to be? Okay, hold on. Oh, relative position, sorry. Yeah. I do admit I'm not the best at visually laying out things on the screen. Like it can be a little bit difficult for me to, oh, that's not showing anything. It can be a little bit difficult for me to kind of wrap my head around sometimes. You have to take into account a lot of things at once, and this is only 2 dimensions. Like I can't imagine doing 3 dimensions. I'll probably play around with that at some point, but I'm not even close to being there yet. We have never set a selected attack. Can I initialize that to the... Can you get the first element of an unordered map? How would you do that? Okay, well, we'll just kind of try that. So that's state player attacks begin first, I think, equals. Why is that blowing up? Can I just hard code this for right now? We'll come back to that. Or it's probably that I just can't do it at that level. So how about in our update, kind of when our battle kicks off here, we do that, maybe. So the player should be initialized by that point. That's better. Okay, so we have our icon. I need to adjust the position of that a little bit, and then we need to do some keyboard events. So if you push up or down, it will change the selected attack. I'm just going to copy this for a second. Okay. So our icon was a little bit too low. Minus 10, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. Maybe just call it 8. I know it's a little bit arbitrary there, but to some extent that's just how it's going to be. I mean, it's differently sized than the text, so you don't have like a perfect baseline to go on. Okay, so now we just need to adjust that based on our keys. Key up, key down. So like, how do we get the next attack? I'm storing a string right now that corresponds with the attack. Can we store an iterator? And then if you hit up or down, you just increase or decrease that iterator, and then that ultimately equates to the selected attack, right? Because then you can adjust it. Otherwise, I would need to figure out what the next attack in the unordered map is, and then save that as a string, save the key value, you know. But I don't really know how to do that. I don't know if that's a thing that you can do. But yeah, so that needs to not be a string. That can be an iterator. And so selected attack, I mean in the equals begin. So that'll initialize our selected attack to the first item in the attacks unordered map. And then if selected attack first equals iter first, you're checking if the keys compare. Which they should. Right, So X is still selected. Now in our up and down, I'm sorry, I just passed over that. Here it is. In our up and down, we essentially want to do the same thing in both of those, just different directions. So we can make a function to change attack. Now, what do we want to leverage within our unordered map to... Well, you can do plus plus, you can do increment and decrement on those. Now, what happens if you get to the end? Right, so if you're at the beginning, okay. Can you pass like an operator into a function in C++? I don't know. Pass operator to function. I'm not going to mess with that. I'm going to keep this simple for right now. I'm just going to pass an integer increment, so you can do +1 or -1 on that. I don't know if that's the best way to do it. I can come back to that, but for right now, I kind of want to gloss over that detail. So up, we change attack -1, right? Because you're going back up, and then down will be change attack +1, because it's a little bit backwards of what you might think it would be, but we'll just go with that. So change attack, selected attack plus equals increment. You can't do plus equals on that, but can I do plus plus on that? Yes, I can. So we'll just do a bool because you only have 2 values that you can either go forward or back, so we'll just do that. So if increase, do selected attack, we'll do pre-increment, else that. So that should move the iterator position. Obviously, if I'm at the beginning and I try to go back, that's going to blow up, which we'll see in a second here. If I go down there, you can change the selected attack. Now, if I'm at X and I go up, that takes us off into nowhere land. So I need to make it so if I hit up now, it goes to stick, or it doesn't do anything. Right? So if we're at we can check if we're at the beginning of the iterator. So if the selected attack equals state player attacks begin, basically we want to make selected attack equals the last attack, right? Because that'll take you to the bottom of the list. And so conversely, if we're in the end here, we want to take us back to the beginning. Otherwise, we can actually do the decrement. So if we're at the end of the loop, just skip back to the beginning, or if we're at the beginning of the loop, just skip back to the end if you hit the correct key. No, that's... blew up on that for some reason. Jump in here, state player text begin. Does that work? I mean, do I have to just... That doesn't seem like that would make any sense. No, it doesn't. Of course not. So, okay, how about this? Comment that out for right now. I'm not entirely sure what I did to blow shit up there. Goes into battle. Okay, so we do that. So what's the problem with this? Check if iterator at start. Oh, here, decrement an iterator from begin. Here, we could just disallow the here, let's try this. If selected attack is not the beginning of the iterator, and in this case, not equals end, kill this stuff. We'll see if it likes that. Oh, now we can't go up and down even. Oh, well, I kind of have these switched around. So if we're not at the end, we can continue until the end. Else, if we're going the opposite way, if we're not at the beginning yet, we can go back up until we get to the beginning, but we can't go past that, is what that's going to be doing. Okay, so that's closer to what we want, but we're not getting our initial selection, though. State player attacks begins. So selected attack is getting initialized there. And then in our render, render attacks. If selected attack first equals I need to, here's our problem. I think that this is setting, let me do this. So for iter, that might have something to do with it, perhaps. Or not, I don't know. Okay, so that's kicking us down to the end, interestingly. Attack. This is mildly wonky. I'm of course doing something stupid, but that's par for the course. But it is a learning experience, isn't it? That's more or less why I'm doing this in the first place. I'm just curious about how all this should work. So selected attack first equals iter first. Selected attack should be the first thing iter plus plus. So I feel like our iterator should be a standalone thing here, but the state player attacks maintain its own kind of internal iterator state, and we're just kind of monkeying around with that. I mean, does that make any sense? I don't know. I don't really know the implementation of unordered maps and standard types and how they maintain iterators, if they even do. I don't know if that makes any sense. Okay, so that just blew up. And that started correctly, except that blew up at the end. Now again, that started correctly. We can't go past the start, but we're going past the end there. Can you do like a -1 on that? That's... You can't really do that, can you? Okay, just Google search for what you're looking for here. We need to not look at on our map, we need to look at iterators. And see how those actually work. Advance, back, insert, begin, end. Returns an iterator pointing to the past the end element in the sequence, so past the end. So attack is never going to be the past the end element, because that's is next actually if advanced. Okay, so if selected attack next not equals is it next and previous, next and prev. Well, this was already fine, but let's see if this helps at all. Next is not a member of that. For each, my list begin. That's a wonky example. Okay, well, I'm coding that like a moron. I mean, I'm kind of programming that in the way that I want to, not the way that it should be. So how do I figure out if the next element, is it standard next? If you're adding one, that might be more what I'm looking for. I'm sorry, but I do find C++ to be a little bit less than intuitive. That probably is a lot of lack of experience on my part. But that seems to work. Okay, we'll take that. So I guess we'll just have it so it doesn't loop back around, right? So if you're here, well, now it's starting at the bottom. So if you're at the top and you push up, it's not going to go back around down to stick. If you're at stick and you push down, it's not going to go back around to axe. And the question is, why did it start out at the bottom that time? So it's starting at kind of a random position, and I'm not sure why that is. Returns an iterator pointing to the first element in the sequence. And that is what I'm setting my iterator to down here. Player text begin. That is the first element in the sequence. I'm only updating selected attack when change attack is called. And that's only happening if I push up or down. If showing dialogue text, because we can leverage that Boolean for other stuff, like if we're showing say how much damage you did to the enemy, we could probably use that. So here, let me showing intro. How do you, what's the hotkey to change that? Control F2? No. F2, okay. Showing dialogue. Yes, please rename it. Cannot confirm reference. Fine. I will change it manually. Okay. This can go away. Now back in my up and down. We'll just do it in here. if not showing dialog. Indent that. So that should prevent it from switching even if the dialog is showing, because it was actually incrementing and decrementing that iterator even though I wasn't showing the attacks yet. So now if I'm on this screen, if I push up and down all I want to, if I go into the attack selection, it's going to keep it selected at axe to start with no matter what. So that's good. Now, let's see. Bool selecting attack equals false. Not showing dialog. Showing attack equals true. We kind of need to maintain a state here that kind of goes through a sequence of events. So I don't necessarily showing dialogue. I'm going to change that back to showing intro for right now. And then I suppose in the next video I'm going to work on figuring out the logic for how to go through the various steps in the battle and not get a tangled mess of code throughout all of this. So thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.